Hello and welcome to the review for test 1 video. It's going to cover the review questions given on the PDF version of the review that's on Moodle. So this will be broken up into two parts because I think the video would be too long to cover the whole thing in 15 minutes, and that's my restriction here. So in this first video we're going to cover the first few problems, starting with the first problem set, which is finding the distance and midpoints formulas. So this is the problem set 1 on your review. So we're going to start with this problem here. Here we're going to do the distance and the midpoint formula. You have to remember that the distance formula is, well, let's find us a writing tool here first. Okay, the distance formula is d equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And the midpoint formula, the midpoint is given as the average x2 plus x1 over 2 and y2 plus y1 over 2. It's the average of the 2 points. So on the first value here, since there's 0 zeros involved here, we're going to be subtracting and we'll be getting these values. So in the distance formula number 1, we'll get 4 minus 0 squared plus 2 minus 0 squared, which is going to be 16 for the first one, because 4 minus 0 is 4, so it's 4 squared, which is 16, and 2 squared, which is 4. So we're going to have 16 and 4, which is the square root of 20. Now that's going to reduce to, there's a square root of 4 times the square root of 5 there, so that's going to be 2 square root of 5 reduced for the distance. Now the midpoint is just the average of the 2 points. Since the one point is 0, 0 and the other one's 4, 2, when we do the midpoint we're going to get 4 plus 0 over 2 and 2 plus 0 over 2, which is the midpoint's going to be 2 comma 1. Alright, on this problem, since these are not zeros, we're going to have a little bit longer distance formula, but the distance formula is still going to be the same. We subtract the x's, 4 minus 4, which is nice. That's going to be 0. 4 minus 4, here's our x's, here's our y's. We're going to subtract the y's then. And when I do this, usually I just think about how far apart they are. And that gives me the answer anyway. So how far is 8 from negative 4? So that distance is going to be 0 for the first one and 12 for the second one. Distance from 8 to negative 4 on the number line, or if we did this, we change these to plus. Okay, so the distance formula here is going to be 12 squared, which is 144, which then has a square root, which is 12 again. So the distance there is 12. Didn't circle, but there's my formulas answers, my distance formulas. Now, my midpoint here is going to be an average, so we're going to take 4 plus 4 for the first one and average that, 4 plus 4, and negative 4 plus 8, and average that. So we would get 4 on the first one because we got 8 over 2. Second one we'd get 4 over 2, which is 2. So our midpoint is 4 comma 2. Alright, so those are two formulas that you need to know, distance and midpoint, and there's an application that's going to be on the test there. Alright, second problem on the review is asking you to write an equation for a circle given this information. So the information is plugged in to the formula for a circle. The formula for the circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. That's the standard equation, standard form for a circle, given that h and k is the center and r is the radius. Well, in this problem they gave you all the values that you need to plug in. So they gave you -1 for h, and for k they gave you -2, and for r they gave you 1. So we would just simplify this and write it out in simplest form, which would be x plus 1 squared and y plus 2 squared equals 1. 1 squared is 1, so that would be our answer to the standard equation of a circle. All right, and then our application, this is similar to a focus problem that you had. The application to these two things would be to write the equation of a circle, right? But not knowing the center and the radius, but finding it in the problem. So in this problem here, we have a circle with the endpoints of the diameter given. So that means in general we would have a circle and we'd have these two endpoints from here to maybe across to here. What we would need to do here is find the distance between them, cut it in half to find the radius, and find the midpoint, which would be the center. So we need those two things. So the center is going to be equal to the midpoint. Center is equal to the midpoint formula, and the radius is going to equal a distance formula. Now, on both of these, on mine I'm going to find the center first, and then find the radius. So the center here, we're just going to do that, is going to be the midpoint formula between these two. So the midpoint formula is an average. So you take the average of -3 and 5 to get the midpoint, and we take the average of 2 and -6 to get the midpoint there. That would be -2, oh, sorry, not -2. That would be +2 over 2 and -4 over 2, which would be, the center would be 1, -2. That's the center. All right, and then the radius would be, for me, I'm going to use the center, so I'm going to actually, since I've found at this point in the graph, I'm just going to do from one point to the center. So I'm going to take the distance from -2 to -3, 2, which is our first point on the diameter. And that'll give us the radius of the circle. And then we can plug it into the formula that we had up here, which was this formula right here, to get the equation. But we need the two pieces of information. Right now we have one piece of information, the center. We need to find the radius also to complete the equation. All right, so the distance formula, again, we take the x's and we subtract them. So in this case, I'm going to do -3 minus 1, and then 2 minus -2, and that would be my distance. Or really, we're just finding how far apart are these values. How far is it from 1 to -3? In that case, it's either 4 units or -4 units, depending on which way we count. And our equation is going to be -4 units because we counted backwards. We went from -3 to 1, so we counted backwards. On the number line here, we go from 2 to -2, so that's going to be a +4 squared. So both of these are 16. So we have 16 and 16, which is 32. So this is the radius, Well, we're lucky that the equation for the circle has a radius squared in it, so we don't really need to take the square root of it, get a decimal, because when we square this, it's going to give us 32 back. So our equation is going to be x minus our center point, which was positive 1, and then y minus our center point, which is negative 2, and our radius was the square root of 32, but we're going to square that. So our final answer for this is x minus 1 squared plus y minus, or y plus 2 squared equals 32. That would be our solution to the equation of the circle given that information.